such as like time clocks, locker rooms, employee restrooms. Obviously, in the employee restrooms, you're going to have soap and water there as well, but it is still one more thing that they can do as they're walking out. Be sure to look at the different areas that that employee could potentially come in contact with and that your customers can come in contact with, such as railings, escalator handles, elevators, elevator buttons, the front doors. If you do not have a revolving front door or automatic opening doors, make sure that you're wiping those spots down. Right now, areas that are highly recommended also are pools. Most of the brands are even recommending that you have hand sanitizer available outside of each elevator landing. We've heard from a lot of hotel properties right now that they're having difficulty finding these, especially the standalone hand sanitizer stations where it's actually got the stand. Some are getting around it by just mounting them to a wall. Some are having custom-made stands for their sanitizers. So it's just a best practice right now.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Regarding PPP, must an employer pay for the employees' PPP, specifically face coverings?
Again, no, they do not have to actually pay for it. But as an industry, I strongly recommend that you do. It is a courtesy. It's showing that you care about your employees. It's also showing your customers that you're worried about both their safety as well as that of the employee.
Okay. And before we finish here, we may be able to post a link that we have on our website that has a list of PPP providers. So hopefully that will help you. So when you're thinking about the new guidelines that are in place, whether it's CDC, the state, health department, what type of signage, if any, is a hotel required to post in the front of the house?
Pretty much in phase 3, the state opened up for business again. I strongly recommend that you check with your local municipality, as they may have stricter enforcement, or they may not be up to phase 3 yet, such as the city of Norman. They do not go to their phase 3 until June the 12th. And even when they do go to phase 3, they still have limitations on group sizes, things like that. When it comes to signage, it is strongly recommended through the health department that you still post a notification on your entrances and typically at the exits as well, if you're doing like a pathway style system in your operation, that states that if you are exhibiting symptoms of COVID-19 or if you have a fever of 100.4 or above, do not enter this facility. Through phase 1 and phase 2, that was mandatory. Most brands and through Safe Stay, those are still required as part of those programs. Again, I've actually seen several for Choice Hotels, different brands like that, that are making this mandatory.
Okay, all right. And when it talks about, and also you may have signage that you would like to post that is explaining the enhanced cleaning standards that your hotel is offering. So that also will be helpful to guests to know what your processes are if you choose to do that. And then when it comes to back of the house signage, you can see where some of that same signage would be in play, but specifically things to help employees remember new protocols. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. The one that I would recommend would be if you feel sick, and kind of explain what some of those symptoms are. If they're showing nauseous, if they're just dizzy, if they're having a fever, anything like that, make sure that they do not come into work. If they know that they have been exposed to somebody with COVID-19, make sure that they stay home for a minimum 72 hours without exhibiting any kind of signs that they have COVID-19. Another suggestion would be if they have the capability of getting tested, go get tested, talk to their physician, see if this is something that they can return back to work or if they should stay home for a minimum. The recommendation right now is 3 days, which is 72 hours. On some of these also, especially your room service, make sure that you're encouraging utilization of room service, but contactless room service. Do not have your room service attendants actually walk into a customer's room to do any kind of setups for that food. A lot of them now, you guys are using like bento boxes where you're taking up the food in a prepackaged setting, more as a to-go type item. Also consider reducing the number of items that you guys have available through your room service, just to kind of help with the short staffs that a lot of you are dealing with right now. Any
All
other
right.
questions?
Thank you very much. We might also mention too, make sure that you are posting signage back at the house to remind your employees the proper way to wear and handle and dispose of masks, gloves, washing their hands, avoiding touching their face and things of that nature. That will also help. Let's move on. Let's continue with employee and guest health and talk about employee temperature checks, symptoms and diagnoses of COVID-19. Must an operator temperature check their employees, Colin?
No, they do not have to under phase 3. Again, if you notice, a lot of what I'm answering changed effective June 1st, this last Monday. What was mandated is now strongly recommended through the state health department, as well as Oklahoma City County Health Department, Tulsa County Health Department, and many of the others, Cleveland County Health Department as well. It is only a recommendation, but if you are unable to do it, I would highly recommend that you at least have a form put together for your employees to sign off on that goes over what your policies are as a company. Make sure that you have the question on there or statement that you understand if they are at 100.4, you do not want them to enter your facility. If they're exhibiting signs of COVID-19, or if they just feel ill, it is best practice to keep that individual at home or send them home. Do not let them cross-contaminate everybody else if they potentially have it. Under this one, responding swiftly and reporting to local health officials any presumed cases of COVID-19. That is part of the Safe State program, as well as most brand standards require you to actually notify the health department. Oklahoma is a little bit different on how they do this and recommend it. Through the state health department communications that I've had with them several times recently, and they keep reconfirming to me that if an employee or if anybody within your facility tests positive for COVID-19, they are the ones doing the background checks. They're notified by that healthcare employer or by the testing facility that this employee or this person has COVID-19. They're going to call you. They're going to get you in touch with each one of your employees that potentially could have come in direct contact with this person. Something that you need to take into consideration, though, is protecting this person's rights. Under ADA regulations, you cannot disclose who this person is. You need to keep that anonymous. But you can let others know that they have potentially been exposed, suggest that they go get tested immediately if possible, or quarantine themselves for a minimum 72 hours, that 3-day time span.
Okay, thank you very much. We're going to move to a couple of chat questions. Colin, I'm going to ask Jim Hopper, our president and CEO, to open his microphone because I think we're going to ask him to help us with these questions. Jim, the first question, if you can open your mic, should there be a confirmed case of COVID of a staff member, will that fall under workers' comp? And would the property be responsible for any expense incurred by that employee?
You know, that's a good question. And the latest that I've seen on that is that that's being determined in the courts, whether or not an exposure and maybe actually contracting the virus at work is considered a workers' comp claim. And it's been some time ago, but I saw an article about a worker, I think it was maybe at the zoo or somewhere, that had only been to work and been home. Nobody at home had contracted the virus, so he was making the claim that that he had contracted the virus at work, and they were litigating that. I don't know what the outcome of that has been, and it may be too early to know. So the short answer is we're not sure. That will be litigated, and we'll get that information out as soon as we know.
All right. The follow-up question to that, which is similar, is if there is a staff member who's been in contact with a confirmed case, does it mean that those employees are subject to workers' comp as well? So it sounds like we don't know that answer just yet, but we will make sure and address those two things as soon as we can.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Another follow-up question to that, based on the guidance from HR as of right now. Oh, okay. This is a statement that someone's answering. He said guidance from HR right now, they cannot claim workers' comp. I don't know that we have that confirmed, as you said, but that was a statement from
But
someone.
that's
Okay,
going to be, that's going to be litigated.
yes. Okay. Thank you, Jim. Colin, let's move on to our next question.
Okay.
You may have answered this since I went to chat. Did you tell everyone if an employee has a fever or worse, test positive, what the proper procedure is for reporting? I think you covered that, didn't you?
I did a little bit. If you actually have an employee that tests positive for COVID-19, they need to self-quarantine for 14 days minimum. Once they're done with that 14 days, they need to be symptom-free for another 72 hours, so another 3 days, and then they can return to work at that point. A question we get a lot is, do they have to have a doctor's note to return to work? I will tell you this, typically they will not have a doctor's note to return to work. If an employee does get one that is a release, definitely keep it on file in your human resources area. That way you can show, if litigation comes up, that you did not have that employee working during that time. You've done everything in your power to protect the rest of the coworkers as well. But it is not technically mandatory.
Okay, thank you. I think we've answered all of the questions in chat. We just got a couple more. Hold on here. Okay, we'll get to pools here in just a few minutes. And yes, we reported earlier that some of the brands are requiring PPE, excuse me. Okay, so moving on to cleaning and sanitizing protocols. Can you talk a little bit about that? You know, protocols should include EPA approved disinfectants that meet CDC requirements for fighting against the virus and bacteria and bloodborne pathogens. We have always referred people to CDC guidelines, but can you tell us this? Are health departments requiring hotels and restaurants to use disinfectants, or are sanitizers acceptable?
Yeah, the main difference right now, and that's a good question, is cleaning, sanitizing, and disinfecting. There's a big difference between the three. Cleaning, basically, you're getting rid of any visible debris off of that surface. Sanitizing, you're getting rid of the majority of the virus. Disinfecting, it is eliminating that virus. Right now, yes, they are requiring on any non-porous surface that you use disinfectants. That is through state health department guidelines. That is just a standard practice anytime with the health department, but it is emphasized right now with COVID-19 that you do this. Areas to consider again are your front desk, any common area that customers come in contact with quite a bit, such as your elevators, escalators, stairwells. And that is something that through Stay Safe and through many of the brands I read specifically, that they're requesting that you go through and look at your stairwells. They're not typically used if you have elevators in your property. Now under COVID-19, a lot of your guests are choosing to use the stairwells. Make sure they're not tired, not dingy. Consider upgrading the lighting in them or painting the walls a brighter color. Maybe just going through and making sure that they're dusted, that they're vacuumed, depending on how your stairwells are set up. But that is something that all of the brands keep kind of reiterating.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, and we know customer touch points are very important as far as sanitation goes, and that really will be at the forefront of what's going on in the lodging industry for quite a while or from now on. Can you just remind us of a few?
Just a touch. Something that I would recommend too, each one of y'all has a chemical company that you work with, mainline distributor. Make sure that you're talking to them about different options for the sanitizers that they provide and for the disinfectants that they provide. And some could be a combo, sanitizer, disinfectant. Get the MSDS sheets on those, how they are best used and what surfaces can you use them on. We're getting a lot of questions right now about how do I clean my fabric chairs, the chair backs, things like that. The headboards, if it's a cloth headboard versus a hardwood headboard. I strongly recommend talk to your supplier. They usually have a solution for it. Some of the brands are even going farther and actually requiring you guys to do a either fog or misting sanitizer system in your properties.
Okay, thank you. And then also some other areas just to be mindful of: ATM machines, there is probably one hotel or two that I know of that have escalators, stair rails, fitness equipment, pool seating, the surrounding area, food contact surfaces. If you have any kind of menu or promotional materials that are out that are touched by guests, remember to do that. And don't forget shared equipment like your housekeeping carts after a shift change. Those things will be important as well. So speaking about cleaning, let's visit laundry for a moment. Are there requirements for guest laundry in a hotel?
No, there are not. You pretty much go back to your standard health department guidelines from previous to COVID-19. Best practice though, and currently most of your brand standards recommend that you bag dirty linen inside the guest room to eliminate excess contact while in transport. Launder, use the warmest possible setting that you can for that particular item, bedspreads, blankets, any of your bedding. Most of the brands are also recommending that you remove any of the bed skirting right now. They understand that it may leave some things exposed, but it's a lot less often that you're cleaning those. Consider anything that can be cleaned after every guest. Patty, we're also receiving a lot of questions about how long do I have to shut my room down for after a guest has been in the room. There is no mandate on that. It is your standard room cleaning. Follow your procedures, your guidelines for your brand. Some of them are requiring that you close that for a minimum 24 hours. We've heard brands push it as far as 72 hours that room would be out of service.
Are you talking about if there has been a confirmed case?
It's not. It was within the brands themselves, which I was surprised when I read that, that they were recommending those types of shutdowns. I've actually talked to Jim. We've also had communications with our health departments about that, specifically the state health department, Oklahoma City and Tulsa health departments, of what their guidelines would be on that, or at least what their recommendation would be. And they said, if you're following your best practices like you did before for cleaning your rooms,
right,
you should be safe with allowing that next guest to be able to check into the room.
Okay. All right. So we're talking about any guest, any stay, not necessarily
Right.
a COVID confirmation. All right.
Yeah.
So follow
COVID-19,
so follow the health department rules.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, let's move on to some questions for a moment because they're follow-up to this. Back to PPE for a minute. Has there been any talk from Capitol Hill if the additional expenses for COVID-19 and PPP items will be a tax write-off for businesses? Jim, do you know the answer to that? We'll get him unmuted here.
Yeah. I don't know. There are so many asks that are pending in Congress. That may be one of them that sounds reasonable, but I don't know the exact answer to that, and probably hasn't been determined yet whether that's going to be a tax write-off. My best advice would be to check with your accountant or your CPA to see if they have information, because I know that they are continually getting updated on things that Congress is working on. Just as an aside, the House is in recess most of the rest of this month of June. Doesn't mean they can't do some work. They have to do it by unanimous consent, which is extremely difficult to do. The Senate is in session pro forma. Actually, they're in session full bore. And the reason that I share that is that a lot of these asks are not going to be coming down the pike very soon, but I know those asks have been made.
Okay. All right. Thank you. We have a comment from someone that says they've spoken with Dr. Dart at Tulsa City County, who said it is not necessary to shut the room down after you clean and disinfectant. So that answers that. Can we go back to sanitizers and disinfectants for a moment? Colin, would you reiterate the differences between those two products again?
Yeah, the main thing about a sanitizer is it is actually set up to kill the majority of the virus on any non-porous surface. A disinfectant is basically something that you would do as a spray for commonly touched products, hand railings, things like that. You can do it. It kills the majority of the virus. Typically, when you're doing a disinfecting, you will actually shut that area down until the product is dry. The chemicals, some of them will actually have a dye in them now that will appear under black light that lets you see that it is still an active product. Some of the products are going right now up to 30 days that they are actually still a usable form for killing the virus, especially with some of the static style foggers and sanitizers.
Mhm. So if a hotel has a comforter, as long as they're disinfecting it, sanitizing it, they don't have to change it with, or they don't have to launder it with every turn of a guest. Is that correct?
I honestly don't know the answer to that one, Patty. I've gotten different answers from the health department on it. Some health departments require that you do show currently that those are being laundered
Okay.
every use. Some brands are requesting that those just be removed from the room totally. That is a decision you'll have to make. And again, why I would suggest talk to your chemical provider and what best practices they have. With the MSDS sheets, a lot of times it will show how long that chemical will stay and
Mhm.
how safe that product, the actual comforter would be for the next guest checking in.
Okay. And then there was another question back to the COVID expenses. Should you track those separately? I think that would be just a good best practice to track those, because who knows if something comes up legislatively that you need that information. It would be helpful at the time for you to have done so. So, all right, let's move into food and beverage. Is it a violation in a kitchen or room service if an employee touches ready to eat foods with bare hands?
Bare hands in Oklahoma, we are one of the few states that does not mandate the use of gloves for bare hand contact, or for contact with ready to eat foods is the best way to put it. We strongly recommend through the Restaurant Association, the Oklahoma Hotel and Lodging Association, that employees wash their hands. However, under the circumstances with COVID-19, I also recommend single-use gloves, the use of tongs, pastry wraps when coming in contact with ready-to-eat foods. Items such as breads, any kind of garnishment, lemons, limes, cherries, olives, anything like that. Make sure that you're using the tongs. Something that was pointed out to us, especially within your food service bars, is considering the use of single-use straws that are wrapped in paper versus the old-style stir straws, beverage straws. They come in bulk containers. Same thing with your fruit swords for like olives, your lemons, limes, anything like that that will be a garnishment to a drink. Consider how you present that. Ask the customer if they would like you to go ahead and garnish the drink for them, or if they would like to put their own garnishment in. A lot of companies have gone to that to where it's just at customer request now.
Okay. When you think about, many hotels have restaurants, some have self-serve breakfast areas and beverage stations. So can you talk about what in phase 3 the requirements of those two specific things are currently?
Yeah, there was a lot of discussion about this going into phase 3 with the health departments. The health departments really recommend that you continue to have a employee of the establishment be the ones to serve these types of items from a buffet to your customers. What it's doing is reducing the number of people that will be coming in contact with spatulas, with the tongs, with spoons, anything like that. Same thing for your beverage stations, your coffee services, water break stations, even your juice bars on your buffets. Consider having an employee there to provide a cup to the customer or to actually fill that for the customer at each use. We strongly recommend changing out cups between refills. Don't go up with a cup that you've already been touching. You've had your mouth on it. You've had your hands all over it. Get them a fresh cup to be able to get that refill. Also consider in like your banquet departments, if you're going to be setting a table, consider putting maybe 2 or 3 per person bottles of water down to where you do not put out a beverage station at this time. Coffee breaks, you might have actually either outside the main banquet room in a common area, but set times that they can come in waves to get a refresh of coffee. One of the challenges that we're running into on that are the ones that want that coffee break in the room. The confidentiality of what may be going on in those meetings and having one of your employees in that meeting. Several general managers that I've talked to have voiced that concern to us. So that
Okay.
is something that you need to consider.
And what about, what should a hotel do? And here again, those are recommendations, not mandates, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Absolutely correct.
So on a traditional buffet of any kind, whether it's continental breakfast, lunch, dinner. Talk about some best practices that a hotel should consider when they have an attendant or attendants at those stations.
Yeah, under the COVID-19 right now, with everything going on, we would recommend that any employees working those buffets, those limited service areas, room service, wear PPE equipment. Go ahead and put the mask on. Make sure that that mask is over both the nose and the mouth. I would have them go ahead and wear single-use gloves. Change those after each use. So whenever you're taking it, when you're done with that customer's order, change gloves, put on another pair, preferably wash hands between it. One of the things that we've talked about a lot with restaurants is being visible. You are on a stage right now. Unfortunately, customers are trying to find you doing something wrong. They love to post it to social media. Make sure that if your employees are coming out in the front of the house, if you have the capability of them washing their hands out in the front of the house, do it. If you don't have that luxury and it's not an area that they can be visibly seen, that's where you start using the hand sanitizers. I got done with that group. I'm gonna sanitize my hands in front of those customers as I'm walking away. It just helps increase the customer satisfaction that you're doing everything you can to protect them.
Right, right.
Wash your
And then,
hands
there are all sorts of precautions that you can take with sneeze guards, the way you're doing your food displays, the way you are releasing people into breaks. And of course, a lot of that has to do with working with your meeting professional to make sure that together you're accomplishing the things and meeting each other's expectations. So keep that in mind as well. What about ice machines in a hotel, Colin?
It's another one that I've seen a lot since I've been reviewing the different brand standards. A lot of the brands are requesting that you shut down your actual ice machines on every floor and remove the ice buckets in each room. They will be available upon request, that either room service can bring up to the guest upon request, or that the guest can go down to a food service outlet and get a full bucket that has been sanitized properly. You've got the liners and stuff in them, but I was surprised. I know Marriott has that in their guidelines. The Stay Safe program was actually, or Safe Stay, I apologize, I keep doing that. With that program, they recommend, again, shutting those machines down. If you are going to continue to utilize them, make sure that you actually are sanitizing and changing those buckets between each guest use, not just providing liners for those buckets. Actually take the bucket, wash it, sanitize it, have it ready for the next use.
All right, great. We'll talk more in detail about distancing practices that a hotel should keep in mind here in a few minutes. But with regards to the bar tops and the dining room capacity restrictions, what are, if any, seating or distancing restrictions right now?
Okay, according to the governor and the Department of Commerce, effective June 1st, restaurants, your food outlets can resume normal business capacity. The state health department is still strongly recommending maintaining a 6-foot social distancing between groups and parties. If for no other reason, it is public perception right now. It's hoping to reduce and trying to keep us on a downward curve of people that are infected with COVID-19.
Okay.
But you can resume full capacity in your food service outlets.
Okay.
Patty, I do want to clarify something on that, though, is the definition of a food service outlet versus a bar. What is classified as a bar, your primary business is alcohol service, and you have to be 21 and over to enter that establishment specifically. Now, where this gets confusing for hotel properties is you may be licensed as a hotel service that just happens to have a liquor license. That covers all of your hotel. Your bar, your choice on that is that you are the one setting that there's no one under 21. But technically, you could open up your entire facility. You are not a bar. That is not your primary purpose. Where it gets really confusing is if you are subleasing a lounge or a bar to someone else, their license may state that they are a bar. Therefore, you may still have the 50% maximum capacity. I know specifically the city of Tulsa and also the city of Norman still have a basically 50% capacity on bars.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Has ABLE changed any regulations to allow more flexibility for hotels regarding selling and service of alcohol, either from their bars, room service, or sundry shops?
Yes, the governor signed Senate Bill 1928 that made the emergency rules that were put in place by Director Burt with the Able Commission at the beginning of COVID-19 permanent. This allows for anybody with a catering mixed beverage, a mixed beverage license, or a beer and wine license to be able to do to-go orders, curbside, and delivery of beer and wine. I want to clarify, this does not include spirits. No mixed beverages, no to-go margaritas or bellinis out the door. It is specifically originally unopened bottles of beer and wine. One thing that this did open up, though, and we've had a lot of requests for this over the last 2 years from hotel properties, especially with brand standards requiring the possibility of doing alcoholic beverages from sundries, as well as still having a licensed on-premise bar or restaurant. This does allow now for you to be able to do to-go sales and delivery from your front desk if you choose to do that. Your front desk staff would have to have a liquor license from the Able Commission. Just like anybody else, all retail outlets now have to have it as well if they're selling alcoholic beverages. To actually sell that product, you only have to be 18 years of age or older with a valid liquor license. One issue with this, though, is if you were going to store that alcoholic beverage at the front desk and your employee is the one that's reaching in to pick up that bottle and sell it to them, they would need to be 21 because they are reaching into a restricted cooler. Those coolers do need to be posted, no one under 21 on the cooler. We have some that are putting just a display refrigerator behind the front desk to where the front desk employee is the one that will reach in and get that for them. The sundries area, you can post on it. Able would notify and do the stickers on them, but the guest can actually come up, pull that out of the cooler, take it to the front desk, and have that sold to them as a to-go item or as a delivery item.
Okay. What about Senate Bill 1928?
That was what we were talking about.
That
Patty.
is all of that. That covers. So the 13.5 mixed beverage gross receipts tax does not apply on carry out or delivery of the beer or the wine, right? But the tax is still due for all on premise.
That is correct. If you're selling it for on-premise consumption to be drank there on property, it is subject to the 13.5% mixed beverage tax and sales tax. Anything that is served as a carry-out to go, these are items, and I do want to clarify, I appreciate you saying that, Patty, that if you purchase that from the front desk, you do not want this customer sitting in your lobby drinking that beer once they purchase it from you and popping the top on it. That is to take to their room, that is their permanent residence, or they can take it off property or to a non-licensed area within your facility. Some hotels choose to license their pools as part of their licensed facility, outdoor patios, potential smoking areas. That is something you need to consider is, did you license your entire property or did you only license designated areas like your bar, your restaurant, food service outlets, things like that?
Okay. And then we've also been asked if a business or a hotel in this case can sell those pre-mixed canned cocktails as a part of what they're selling from the front desk, and the answer is no, you cannot. So
the answer is no on a true cocktail. Where this gets confusing and kind of convoluted too is if it is a wine-based or a beer-based, like malt beverage. You'll run into some of those right now. Some of the seltzers are actually mixed with a wine base, doing like a Bellini seltzer. Those you can technically do. If it is a vodka-based or a tequila-based, anything that is a true spirit, defined as a spirit, you cannot do that.
Okay. All right. So many hotels have outdoor patios, and they can all be licensed in different ways or not licensed at all. So what ABLE or municipal regulations should a hotel keep in mind when they're expanding their licensed outdoor patio seating to gain some additional seating for their restaurant or their bar?
I would be happy to answer this, but I'm actually going to defer to Jim if he would like to answer it, because he was working with the local municipalities on getting these regulations set for us. Jim, would you mind? I'm going to give him just a second. He's trying to get in.
Tell me that question again now.
What should a hotel keep in mind when they are expanding their outdoor patio seating at the hotel or if they have patio seating adjacent to a restaurant that they may operate.
And they want to expand it.
They want to expand it, yes.
Yeah. The basic thing that they need to do first would be to talk to their municipal government wherever they operate. And we've sent out information. If your operations are in Tulsa or Oklahoma City or Norman, we've sent out, Oklahoma City and Norman. We're still working with Tulsa, but basically you would reach out to your city government and ask what the process would be for you to get permission to expand into your parking lot, or if it was feasible to have a partial street closure, that kind of thing. Anything that would allow you to set up more tables to serve people outdoors, which we understand a lot of diners are more comfortable dining outdoors. The second thing that you would need to do, though, if you have alcohol service and you're properly licensed, is that you would need to contact your ABLE agent, and we can help you do that. Because ABLE has told us in writing that if a property gets permission from their municipal government to expand, ABLE will work expeditiously with you to come out and look and change the perimeter of your licensed area so that you would be able to continue to serve alcohol. So it's a two-pronged approach.
Okay, Jim, I have two other questions for you. Can you re-clarify if a hotel has beer and wine in their market or their sundry shop, does it require a separate license? I think in this case, the hotel also has a restaurant and a bar.
Last year it did. That's a good question, because with the passage of Senate Bill 1928, which last year when legislation was passed and hotels and restaurants were able to get two licenses, one for mixed beverage and one for retail, they were able to do exactly what Senate Bill 1928 allows them to do now. If you've got a mixed beverage license, then you don't need a separate license. I think that that'll still need to be worked out. I don't know that there's a hard and fast answer for that. I would assume that most hotel assumptions are dangerous, but I would think a lot of hotels decided last year that they were going to apply for that second license so that they could do the wine and beer at their sundry shop, at their sweet shop. I don't know that will be necessary under the provisions of Senate Bill 1928.
Jim, through conversations that I've had with Stephen Barker, the general counsel with the ABLE Commission, he was informing me that would basically do away with the requirement for having a retail license as well, that you would be allowed to do it under the Senate Bill 1928.
Okay, so if that is the case, then the answer is no, you do not need a separate license.
We do need to still get something in writing on that that we can forward out to our members, but that was the answer that he gave us.
Okay, so we'll add that to our list of things for follow-up that we can possibly put in a future update. Can we get more clarification for someone from the group regarding Tulsa and Norman's occupancy for bars? I will tell you, if Jim or Colin, you want to take that, I'll let you know that we have been looking since yesterday when we posted all of the new food establishment guidelines for phase 3, which we were a part of drafting. That's why we had the copy. And even as recently as 9 a.m. this morning, the Department of Commerce has still not loaded those on their site. So if you're looking,
I have an update on that.
You do? Okay.
Yeah,
why don't you
I haven't looked at the website, but I do have an email from the gentleman at the Commerce Department, and his answer was it was uploaded. I learned this uploaded yesterday. I learned that sometimes Google and other sites cache documents for faster uploading. Our web liaison sometimes has to flush the cache so that newer versions are retrieved, and said it takes about 2 minutes. I don't know how to check when I'm in a Zoom meeting, but somebody may be able to check that and see if it's been posted to the hours website.
Okay, and we have we have links at the top of the page, I think, for you, where you can download at least the restaurant guidelines. Can you give some more clarification, either of you, on the Tulsa and Norman occupancy for bars, and then we're going to move on.
Jim, I'll take this one if you want me to.
That's fine.
Part of GT Bynum's proclamation, the mayor for Tulsa, on phase 3, it does state that bars are still required to maintain 36 square foot per person for their occupancy in a bar. Basically, that equates to about 50%. Tulsa's, or city of Norman, theirs under the proclamation still, they're under phase 2. And even going into phase 3, they require a minimum 6 foot separation. Bars right now, maximum group for Norman under phase 2, which they're still in, is 25 people per group. When they go to phase 3, projected for June 12th, it goes to 50 people per group. And then you have to have 6 foot social distancing. You can have up to 50 in another group.
Okay, great. Thank you. Let's move on now to social distancing with meetings and events. With the new state guidelines identified in phase 3, explain room sets and social distancing guidelines. Here again, like a lot of these things that we're talking about, most of this is a recommendation, not law, but strongly recommended by the health department. So Colin, can you talk about the maximum capacity for banquets?
Yeah, you need to check with your municipality. I've been looking over Norman, Oklahoma City, Guthrie, Edmond, Ardmore. I have not seen any specific restrictions. CDC recommendation is no more than 250, but the state of Oklahoma does not set a maximum anymore for banquets. The health department strongly suggests spacing between tables, 6 foot spacing. Maximum to a table pretty much recommended was maximum 10. That's pretty much your max size that you're going to go to on most banquets. For classroom style seating, they're still suggesting, and this is just a recommendation, no more than 2 per 6 foot table, spaced out at each end of that 6 foot table, and then social distance between the next table. Under the guidelines that came out, there is no maximum. The state recommended also separating by groups. That means if you're a group of 4 and you consider it a 6 foot table, you can technically do that. I go back to what Patty said. Think about public perception of this. Be careful with social media. Do you want to be the one that ends up showing that you have a completely packed house? Patty and I've had this discussion a lot over the last week, is walking social receptions, where you're doing like a beverage cocktail hour, things like that. How many people, how far do I have to distance? Currently, there are no guidelines on that. Recommendation would be 6 foot social distancing between groups in that capacity as well.
Here again, and most hotels are, all hotels that I have spoken with are, they're coming up with their best practices. They are making sure that they work for their operation and within their brand and their city regulations, if they happen to have any, and there aren't many as far as the city goes. And then they're communicating with their meeting planner, and they're just making sure that the objective is going to be met and all of the expectations are going to be met. So that really, into phase 3, with things loosening up the way they have, that is the biggest suggestion that we can make to you. And in one way, it gives you a lot more flexibility than you have had. So that's a plus. The other side of it is the social responsibility. So we know that you'll be on top of those things. How should we handle social distancing at pools? That's a big question that we've gotten.
The pool regulations, it was strange. I went to pull those on Monday. I had a copy from phase 1 and phase 2 that were on the Department of Commerce website. It is no longer there. We're not exactly sure what that means, if they have completely done away with guidelines and recommendations on pools. Up until that point, and best practice that I can suggest, they recommended spacing at least your lounge chairs 6 feet apart per group. Also, your capacity within your pool, try and limit it to about a 50% capacity. Some of the brands that Patty and I have heard from are actually taking reservations for the use of the pool, setting a specific time that that group can be in there, and then they'll clean it, disinfect it, and let another group in. But again, there is no mandate on it. I strongly suggest following the guidelines through the CDC of the 6 foot separation on that for public perception. Same thing if you're going to have food service to your pool. Recommendation, and again, it's up to you at the discretion of your operation, would be to have your employees with the masks and gloves if they're serving directly to a customer.
Okay, great. Thank you. And when it comes to hotel front desk and parking services, we've gotten these questions quite a bit. Just talk about some distancing practices that you can recommend in those outlets, if you will.
Yeah, starting with the front desk, consider putting up the protective barriers such as the acrylics, setting actual guidelines for your queues for customers coming in. Where can they stand to socially distance? Just making it visible to them where they're supposed to be, make the other group feel comfortable as they're checking in. Consider using keyless door keys, your iPhones, cell phones, Androids. A lot of those now will allow you to be able to do a faceless check-in where you can get it on your phone, go directly to your room. Most of the time, it's going to require you to be a preferred customer of that brand to be able to do it. It limits it in most cases to one key per person. Any guest that would be staying in that room with you would still be required to go down and get a physical key, room card, however you want to do it. The room cards, make sure whenever they're coming back, you have a common drop area. I would put the hand sanitizer next to those. And once you actually collect all those, be sure to sanitize, disinfect all of those key cards before you put them back out for use. Talking about the valet service, almost every brand that I've talked about either recommends that you do away with valet service in areas that you can. In cities that do not have that luxury, or in your facility, like in a downtown market that may not have that luxury, you only have the capability of doing valet. Consider the different touch points, door handles, your steering wheel, gear shifters, things like that that you have come in contact with. I would still suggest that those valets wear the masks to keep any kind of overspray splash from being able to get onto this customer's vehicle. A lot of what we've heard about too is best practice of either leaving a courtesy small individual bottle of hand sanitizer, or possibly like the actual wipes, the handy wipes for the customers you're getting out of the car. Using the disposable steering wheel wraps, the plastic ones, is also another suggestion that most brands have had.
Okay, great. Thank you. We don't have any questions right now, so I'm just going to go to some bullet pointed best practices. They're a little all over the place, but you can take these down, or like I said, they will be in our audio and video that we post today. But, you know, in the past, I was on a call last week, and in the past, hotels really want their sanitation company to visit the hotel when the guest traffic is low. So it's not congested. Now more than ever, you really want to be transparent with guests. So if there is a way if you have a cleaning company that's going to come in and sanitize, and there's a way to do that without inconveniencing your guest, a lot of hotels are doing that in high guest touch areas while the guests are actually in the hotel, to be more transparent about what new enhanced processes they're taking. So that's one bullet point for you. Ask a guest's preference before they arrive. If they want extra towels or anything additional in their room, place those in the room prior to them arriving, so that cuts down on employee-guest contact. No housekeeping service, and this is mandated by some brands, I think. No housekeeping service during the stay of the guest, or at least not until requested by the guest, and then recommend communicating this at check-in as well.
Something on that also. Most brands are recommending that you find a time that the guest is not going to be in the room for you to be able to go in and clean it. Try not to do it with a guest there.
Right, exactly. No baggage handling without gloves for protection of the guests and staff. You can consider that. Masks being provided by guests. I don't know of any hotels doing this, but there could be some, and that's totally your prerogative. Hand sanitizers in the lobby, social distancing signage, common areas. We've talked about that. A reminder of signage for guests and employees about the appropriate way to wear masks and dispose of masks. Colin talked about the key card disposal area. Offer room service drops at the door with no guest contact. And he talked earlier about the static sprays and the ultraviolet light processes. So now that we've gone over all of that, I think we have one question. Can you suggest how you handle theater-style seating in event spaces? Rounds, classrooms make sense, but theater is a little more difficult, as is reception, I might add.
Yeah, the best practice on that that we have seen is actually either going every other row, staggering between groups, at least 2 chairs was recommended as well. You'll find a lot of those guidelines under entertainment and banquet facilities through their guidelines. Again, technically there is no restriction anymore, but what the best practice, especially if you have a large banquet hall or if you're doing a theater style training room in some of the properties, would be to talk to your local health department inspector. Whoever typically does your inspections will work with you on a plan. My suggestion would be go ahead and have that plan ready for them, what you would like to do and what your plans and thoughts are, considering the safety of your guests. They are suggesting this especially for large venues like the BOK Center, the Tulsa Drillers, here in Oklahoma City, the Oklahoma City Dodgers, the Chesapeake Arena. We had those discussions with them about those types of events, and they said, let's work it on a case-by-case basis, and that way everybody knows what they're doing.
Right. I mean, the state is still recommending 6-foot difference between tables. So you can logically think, although yes, it takes up more space, that you could distance chairs 6 foot from each other. But that is not a mandate that you do it. And I think people are just going to have to be really creative with their meeting sets. I know that we have a meeting coming up that property has been very good working with us about expanding the space that we typically would have in a full room to create some more space for us. So I think there are a lot of creative things that we're going to see coming out of all of this. I'd like to share with you some information about an industry initiative that AH&LA has officially endorsed and is encouraging our member hotels to participate in. AH&LA's Safe Stay enhanced industry-wide hotel cleaning standards to meet new health and safety expectations presented with COVID. The AH&LA, the American Hotel and Lodging Association, has recently launched Safe Stay. The new nationwide initiative is going to help boost guest confidence. It's focused on enhanced hotel cleaning practices, social interactions, and workplace protocols, and providing some more transparency throughout the guest's journey with you. The brand guidelines are actually more onerous than the Safe Stay guidelines if you are a brand. So it shouldn't be taxing on hotels to implement this, and OH&LA really encourages all hotels to become Safe Stay hotels, meaning that you endorse the standards and will adopt the operating protocols. So we have a link to Safe Stay at the top of our chat feature, and I will show you something here additionally in a moment. So take a look at how your property can become a Safe Stay property. All you have to do is click on the link, endorse that, and then follow those protocols. There will be some additional things that will come out through AH&LA. I can tell you that they are they're working now to announce a training for employees. I think it's like a 15-minute enhanced Safe Stay protocols video, and there will be a certificate of completion. So you can take a look at that, and we'll make sure and remind you of those contents when we have them. I want to take just a minute while we're closing things out and share my screen and show you where you can find some valuable resources. Make sure I've got it up here. So you're looking at the OH&LA website. The top of our site, you know, who we are and what we do, and hopefully all of you know that by now. But you'll also have a couple of links here. This is the information for Safe Stay that we have linked up above, and Hotel Industry Recovery is the site that will take you to another landing page that currently is shared with the Oklahoma Restaurant Association. We wanted to communicate as effectively as we could. Therefore, it made sense, since so much of the two industries are alike that we post only on one site so we can make sure that we are responding to your needs as quickly as possible. And then you will receive today in our update the video and audio of this session. And then I'll remind you that our board member, David Davis, who is CHIA certified as a facilitator, is going to be presenting a session for us. OH&LA, this is not in place of our session in September that we'll be doing, but it is in addition to. We have purchased data that's going to provide an 18-month forecast for our members. We'll be holding that early June. As soon as we can get that info in his hands from STR, then we'll be pushing out a date, and we hope that you'll have your rooms division managers, general managers, AGMs, sales managers, anyone who's interested in that information on the call. So please remember to call on us anytime for anything. We wish you the best as you continue to welcome your guests back. We know it's a trying time and we're still here for you. So thank you for being with us today and have a wonderful weekend. Bye-bye.